now let's see something which we have been doing for a long time, but we did not properly had rules regarding that. It is about identifier naming. So some variables are there. Let's say let look, so here only we can see that let num is equal to 0, right? But is it the case that anything we can write here? Is it the case that anything we can write here? No. What is the standard for? So if you see that if I write name num12, then and I print this num12 variable. So any variable. So identifier means the naming of any variable, right? That can be a variable, that can be a function name. So if you write some function name and let's say ASDF123 whatever, and this is the function name. Now this function name is also an identifier. So any sort of naming for particular things, particular variables, structures, arrays, functions, objects, anything which will have a name. So there are some rules that what name you can use, what name you cannot use. The first rule is, so first of all, let's see some examples. You see that something like test123 will work, something like num12 will work. So you see that it is 0, it is printing 0, that is fine. If I do underscore, it will work. If I put underscore in the beginning, this will work. But let's say 12 I'm writing here. If I write 12 starting with, then see it is giving syntax error. So which means that there are some rules which you have to follow. Or let's say you are writing num underscore new, let's say, then this is fine. But if you write num hyphen num, then see again syntax error is there. Which means that there are some rules. Here we are going to see that the rules is something like this, that all the variables can be like it can start with a alphabet, it can start with underscore, it can start with dollar sign. All letters, alphabet letters, which means all the alphabets, and it is case sensitive. So small TEST and capital TST both are different variables. You can create both of these variables separately because it is case sensitive. That's why they will be treated as separate variables. But these, something like this is wrong. You cannot start the variable name with number. You cannot have a space in the variable name. You cannot have a hyphen in the variable name. You cannot have a hyphen, in fact, anywhere. Okay. So the exact rule is something like this, that the variable, the identifier names must start with a letter, underscore, or dollar sign. Must start with a letter, underscore, or dollar sign. Only these three is possible. And letters means all the small letters A to Z, or capital letters A to Z. But subsequent characters, from the second character itself, it can also have numbers, but the first character cannot be. Okay. So if you have something like underscore whatever is fine, underscore whatever and then number, that is also fine. And it can even start with see 1 2 that is also fine. From second character the numbers can be there. You cannot put numbers at the beginning. So 1 underscore, that cannot be a variable. Okay. So these are the rules for naming various identifiers in JavaScript. Now we will go to an important concept called objects. Objects are central to the idea of JavaScript data structures, where we so we earlier saw another data structure which is called array. So let's say ARR is equal to 1 2 3. You see 1 2 3 inside the bracket. Okay. So you see this sort of structure where multiple values are there and just it is a collection of values. Arrays are slightly different. They are used to store key value pairs, which means that they are just not isolated values, but there is a key and a value, and there is a pair of that. So something like that. That there is an object, any identifier you can use, and then equal to whatever the name of the variable you are choosing. That variable. Now, if you have this structure, within curly braces, you put a key, name, and then value. So what happens is that here you can have any identifier. So let's say let obj2, let's say this is my object. Okay, then this in curly braces you can write any identifier. Let's say foo is my identifier, and then value, any value you can put. I can put 20, right? And then if you print obj2, this is the name of my object, then you see that foo20 is printed. Okay. Now this thing can be anything. So let's say this can be hello world. That is also fine. That is also fine. So you see foo hello world is there. and more importantly, you can have multiple values. And if you just have one value, then this is a syntax, but actually you can have multiple values. So let's say foo, hello world, and let's say age, it's let's say 28, something like this is there. Okay, then if you print, then you will see that uh, it can have multiple key values. This is one key value, this is one key value separated by comma. So this is how it works. Second thing is that you don't need a separate you can use a separate line. You don't need to put all the things in one line. So right now only two key values are there. Let's say 20-30 key value pairs are there. Then you don't need to write it everything in one line. In fact, you can write in separate lines like this. So as we discussed with arrays, that you can have the starting array block and ending array bracket in separate lines, and anywhere you can write something like this, that let arr is equal to, you can write something like this also, that is fine. But you can very well do something like this also, and it will work. And is in fact something like this will also work. Anything will work, right? All the things will, this thing will work. So from where you start until you end, you can use multiple lines. Same here also. So if you print now, then you see the same answer is coming. So it does not matter. And I mentioned that multiple values can be there. That is what I am saying here, that multiple key value. This key can be any name which you give, and value can be anything. Again, I am just giving here a string. You can give it boolean value. You can give it numbers. You can give it strings as mentioned here, or you can give more complex values. So for example, I can have very well like let's say my list, and then I can have 1 2 3 4 5. I can have array, right? In fact, I can have my list. Let's say my list, my object. Let's say, and then in my object you can have another object which is again and why this thing error is coming, because earlier line is not ending with comma. You see comma, and then that error is gone, right? So here you can write again, like let's say foo bar, whatever. So you can see that when you print, then all these values are printed. Okay, fine. And just now I mentioned that let's say again you start writing something here, then again you need to give comma here. So you can see that if you forget to put comma, then this problem is happening. In order to avoid that, what is happening, that it is allowed to put comma even at the end. Understand? There is no other key value pair after this, but then also it is allowed to put final comma. Why? What is the advantage? Because now what will happen is that if I write my objects like this, and everywhere in every line I am putting comma, then in the next line, if you paste some new thing, then you don't need to remember that the last line I have to put additional comma, right? So this is a newer syntax in JavaScript, but now this simplifies this problem. And the same thing happens with arrays also. You can have multiple you can have commas at the end also. So let's say arr is there. Until now we saw like something like 1 2 3 4. That is fine, right? But in fact, if you put a comma at the end, this is also fine. And right now it does not look a big deal, but you understand if something like this is there. Let's say 1 2 3. Something like this is there. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, and then let's say 7 8 9. Now you see what is happening. That excuse me. So if I don't put comma here, then if I have another line of values, say let's say something like this, then you see error is there. So we should put comma here. But why to remember all these things, right? If we don't declare it like this, if we put a comma a priori, then later you put all the values, any new lines, and again the new lines also have comma. So in that sense it will be very much simpler, and always it will be like easier to extend the array. Okay, so just I wanted to say that when you write something like this or at the end comma, both are perfectly valid. Next we see that what are the rules of naming keys. In fact, in fact you can have any type of values in the keys. You can see that I can have but you can even have inside quotes, you understand. So I'm saying that you can very well write this thing, and that is fine, you see. But you can also write in string. These keys can be in strings also, something like this, and you see that still it will work fine. But just to mention that when we print this, then still it is printed like not strings, right? Why is that? Because by default, if that is a valid identifier, then there is no need to put quotes. There is no need to put quotes, you understand. But if there is invalid identifier, what is invalid identifier? We know that, let's say something like uh, 20 let's say 10 age, 1 age, or whatever, something. This is invalid variable, right? Invalid identifier, because any valid identifier cannot start with 1. Again, if you put underscore in front, then it is fine, you see, this thing is fine, right? But if you have 1, then this thing is syntax error, you see, syntax error is saying, because this is invalid. That is the place where you must use quotes, you understood. So now if you print this, this works fine, and you say that 1 age is a key of this, you understand. So for normal identifiers, you don't need to, you can put quotes here also, but you don't need. But if the identifiers are invalid, then you need to put a code to avoid that. Okay, so for example, I could very well have my underscore age here, and that will work fine, right? But I cannot have something like my hyphen age. But let's say I want my hyphen age only, I don't want my underscore age, then you can put it inside a quote, and you see, now again it will work perfectly. Okay, that is fine. Now let's see that what are the, is there some what are the various values we can have. Now we earlier saw that this value can be anything. I can have string, I can have numbers, I can have other objects itself. Okay, so we saw that rather than simply having simple, let's say let's write a proper object like whatever is mentioned here. Okay, so let's say the person and let's name the proper, let's have the name of this person as the object as person. Okay, and this person has name, let's say John Doe, and after that its age is, let's say 25, and that is the example I'm trying to give, that if I have some address, right, and I have some let's say flat number, right, then I can give another, you understand. So now you see that this is an object, its objects, one of the keys values is again an object, and you can write anything, right, understand. You can write anything, like this can be like 234, anything. So again a separate object can be its key one of the keys value. Not only that, is anything can be there. So let's say here what was the, it's here say some lucky numbers is there, so some lucky numbers list is there, and that can be let's say array. So you can see that it is an array, and you can see that everything works fine. Not only that, you can have the object values as proper functions. So you see that let's say my function is there, something like this. Again, put comma, and then let's say my function is there, and then this is again a function with, let's say, some n is passed, and then n into 7. Let's say this thing is passed. So, and this will be not equal, this will be colon, because I'm not declaring it outside. If you declare it outside, then you need to put something like const this is equal to this, right? So we saw this this is arrow notation of a function, right? We have this, so this thing, this right now, this thing is completely equivalent to what we said, that there is another syntax, it is function, this syntax, and then you can pass here n and then you can return that thing, whatever you are returning there, right? So both of these are completely equivalent, but this is a like shorter way of writing, and that's why this thing is written. In particular, only this part is called anonymous function. Means right now I have not named it anything. When I assign it, then I give it some name. That is fine. But earlier case when we were seeing this is not an anonymous function. This is a proper function. Okay. In fact, there is a way to create anonymous functions here also. You can write something like this, but we will not see that for now. So right now we are seeing that this function is there. Now one thing I might have mentioned or not, if there is only one argument in arrow function, then so if there are multiple arguments, let's say a comma b comma c or whatever, then you need to have these brackets compulsorily, right? Because something like this is invalid syntax, right? However, if there is a single argument to a function, then actually this bracket is optional. You can simply write like this. This will also work, okay? Which means that I can very well write this like normal this thing. And again, if you want to put a comma in the end, that is fine. At the end of every key value, you can put a comma. That is fine. Now you see, if you print this, then also this works fine. It is just showing that some function is there. It is not printing the body of the function. Okay, this is fine. Now let's see that how to access these values. So these values we have declared. Yeah, that is fine. But how do we access the values? Accessing the values has two syntax. One is that you put in quotes, you put like array syntax, but inside that array syntax you put rather than indices, you put the key value, key names. Okay, so something like this, that person, put a bracket, and then inside that put the name. So let's say here name, and if you print this, let's say I print this. For now I don't print the whole object. Then you see that John Doe is printed. But there is another syntax also, right? What you can do is that you can write something like this: person dot and then name. Understand? But the caveat is that this syntax will only work if this name, if whatever the name of the key is there, that key is a valid identifier. Understand? So if I have, let's say, this Lucky, right, then I can very well write person dot that is fine, right? However, see 713 is printed, but let's say this was not a valid identifier. This was like some sort of a string based identifier. So even if it's like Lucky underscore num, if this thing is there, then also it will work fine. Understand? This thing will work fine. However, let's say this, I have some Lucky hyphen num. Now this thing is invalid identifier, so I have to put quotes in here, and now you see that this thing is not working. In fact, something like this will not work. You see, it is treating as minus and somehow like not working, right? So what happens is that you cannot access it by this dot notation. You can access it only using this bracket and then this string key you have to pass that. So still it works, right? And once you are in this thing, then even whatever, let's say, space is there, then that space is also fine. Okay, you see. But for normal identifiers, the easiest way is to use dot name, and that's why you should very rarely try to use some keys as like this. You should simply use valid identifiers, and so that it is very easy to access the values like this. How do you access let's say this flat number? What do? You do something like log, and then you write person, and then you write address, and then dot flat. Understand? So since all the things are valid identifiers, then I can do something like this, right? 13b is printed. However, if let's say this thing is my hyphen address, right, then what happens, that this thing has to be put in quotes. That's why this part cannot be done like this. This part has to be done like this. You see? And then after that again I can do dot flat. Again at the end I can do dot flat, because flat is a valid identifier. And then again it will print 13b. So, but again, you can do here also if you want like longer syntax, then you can use like this also, and it will work fine accordingly, right? So that is the thing. Almost the same thing I discussed, that you can use these, access these values like this, and the values can be like complicated to any level. So for example, here address is a key whose value is an object, but here you see this objects, all the values are a strings or something. Again, this instead of this 13b, again here can be another object, so it can go to any 5 level, 10 level deep, right? That is not an issue. Okay, so that will be fine for now. Let's see you in the next video.